Welcome to this webinar on United Nations Day. Today is the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. And this webinar is coming from our IBVM Loreto office at the United Nations, New York. And this is our way of commemorating 70 years of work of the United Nations. And we're doing it by looking at 2015, which has been a momentous year here. In September, a new Sustainable Development Agenda was approved unanimously by every country member of the United Nations. During the last 3 years, the UN has facilitated a process involving the participation of millions of people around the world, and these people were able to give input into the process. All of this has culminated with the Sustainable Development Agenda, more commonly called the SDGs, or 2030 Agenda. And this will bring us forward during the next 15 years. It aims at transforming our world. This new 2030 Agenda is our collective journey. It's the story each one of us is shaping. It is about us and our lives. And it is as much about the local as the national and international context. It is about ordinary people living their everyday lives, or living our everyday lives. It is indivisible and integrated. That means that it is not a collection of separate items or goals. We have been talking about the world we want during these years, but we realize that we are being presented now with the world we need. In the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, we, civil society, through our political leaders, say that we are determined to end poverty and hunger, to ensure a life of dignity for all. We are determined to protect our planet from degradation and ensure that all human beings have prosperous and fulfilling lives in peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. And we will work together in partnership to do this. To make it easy, we speak about 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. People, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. The 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda provides us with a set of 17 goals, integrated and indivisible, which balance the 3 dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, social, and environmental. It consists of a declaration, 17 goals, means of implementation and global partnerships, and follow-up and review. And today we have speakers from Canada, Italy, United States, and Zambia on this webinar. It is one of 4 we are holding in different parts of the world. And they have prepared their input. They've studied up the documents and prepared specific parts of the whole agenda. And hopefully at the end we will have a good idea of what it's all about. As you listen, you can note your impressions and surprises and what strikes you, and write them in the section for messages. Right, so let's begin. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cecilia Oduar, the IBVM Loreto representative working with civil society of the United Nations in New York, and I will moderate the webinar. And now we'll move to our first speaker. Now, Judith, would you like to come on?
Yeah. I am Judith Lekesa. I'm a Loreto sister from Kenya, but at the moment I'm in Rome, a member of the general leadership. I am going to make a few comments on the declaration part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I would like to start with the remarks of Pope Francis in his opening speech at the UN conference, when he said, "The adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the summit, which opens today, is an important sign of hope. Indeed, it is a sign of hope in the sense that it brings new energy, it brings out that deep desire of the goodness that is within people. It is encouraging, it is inspiring, it is a contemplation of the world as a whole. It is indeed encouraging to see the heads of states and governments and high representatives coming together and recommitting themselves. It is encouraging to see them acknowledging and recognizing that indeed eradicating poverty in all forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, being the greatest challenge. Yet they are ready to dare it. In a world with all the challenges as mentioned in the declaration, that is poverty, denial of human dignity, inequalities at all levels, unemployment, health threats, natural disasters, conflicts, terrorism, name them, which can appear to be hopeless situations and even seem as all is lost. But in this declaration, these leaders are making a statement. Which statement? That not all is lost. They want to rise above these challenges, acknowledging the mistakes done in the past and the willingness to rectify. These recommitments to me are clear signs of hope. Pope Francis in Laudato Si says the same thing. He says, "Yet all is not lost. Human beings, while capable of the worst, are also capable of rising above themselves, choosing again what is good and making a new start, despite their mental and social conditioning." He goes on to say, "I appeal to everyone throughout the world not to forget this dignity which is ours. No one has the right to take it from us." These remarks to me show that there is hope. What seems hopeless can be turned round. The use of "we" and giving the time frame shows that there is a focus and togetherness. It is also encouraging that they have extended the time, thus seeking to address the unfinished business of the Millennium Goals. As they state, we embark on this great collective journey. We pledge that no one will be left behind. Again, here it is the moving together. Again, this goes in line with the appeal of Pope Francis in Laudato Si, when he says, "The urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together. For we know that things can change." To me, this is a sign of hope. He goes on to say, humanity still has the ability to work together in building our common home. There is hope, thus need to work together, which the leaders are trying to pass across. It is hopeful also because this agenda is accepted by all countries and is applicable to all, yet taking into account different national realities, capacities and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. Finally, it is also good to note that these goals are a result of 2 years intensive public consultation and engagement with civil society and other stakeholders around the world. Therefore, it is no doubt that it is a valuable piece of work. In the vision part, they recognize and acknowledge the challenges and the need of new hope or need of new approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. Now we'll move on to the goals, and we'll begin with goal 1, 2, and 3. So ahead now.
Good morning. I'm Evan Hunter, a Loretto sister speaking from Toronto, Canada. I had the privilege of being in New York at the UN for a conference on Agenda 2030 in August. So I'm happy to be able to begin working on our responsibility as civil society to ensure the implementation of these goals by means of this webinar today. I'm going to talk about goals 1, 2, and 3 and some of the targets related to those goals. Goal 1 promises to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Those who live in extreme poverty are identified as those who live on less than $1.25 a day. The first target under this goal is to reduce the number by half by 2030. This was, in fact, the first of the Millennium Development Goals, which world leaders promised to achieve by 2015. Reports indicate that only about 50% were actually lifted out of extreme poverty. Not the hoped-for result, but progress for sure, telling us that it is possible to lift people out of poverty if we but try. This Sustainable Development Goal goes far beyond the Millennium Development Goal, in that it includes targeting the reduction of poverty in all its dimensions, including access to basic services, as well as having sufficient income to meet the basic needs of life. The targets recognize that poverty varies from country to country, so they refer to national definitions of poverty. They call on each country to support investment in accelerated poverty eradication efforts. They call on all countries to create policy frameworks at the regional and national levels, as well as at the international level. They emphasize the obligation of governments of developing countries to accept their own responsibility. It is often written today that in spite of economic growth in some countries, the economic structures have not been altered to create the conditions to reduce poverty, sometimes because of poor governance or corruption, or the influence of transnational corporations. However, poverty is not a problem just in developing countries, but is totally and justifiably existent in rich countries, with huge gaps between the rich and the poor, and unfair and unequal access to opportunity. Governments fail to enact and implement poor policies to protect the vulnerable. So the sustainable goal reminds developed countries of their responsibility for eradicating poverty at home, while also generously assisting developing countries to do the same. Goal number 2 promises to end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and to promote sustainable agriculture. So the link to goal number 1 is obvious. But the targets under goal 2 call for safe food, nutritious food, and year-round access to food at affordable prices for everyone. The importance of small-scale food producers such as farmers and fishers and pastoralists is highlighted, while the perils of agribusiness are identified. Having seed and gene banks available will promote and enable sustainable agriculture on a small scale. Governments, business, and scientists are challenged to make the results of research and technology available to every country as a way to increase local agricultural capacity. This will also contribute to resilient agricultural practices, paying attention to climate change, extreme weather phenomena, droughts, flooding, and pestilence outbreaks, as well as the dangers of air pollution and soil and water contamination. Governments are asked to be especially vigilant in crafting trade agreements that shift power and control to transnational and multinational corporations whose sole goal is to generate profit for shareholders at the expense of the human being. The interconnectedness of the goals and the message of Pope Francis in the encyclical is obvious here. Goal 3 promises to reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70 per 100,000 live births, and to end preventable deaths of newborn and children under the age of 5. Though the MDGs had a similar goal, it too was not totally achieved, but a 37% decline was noted, so again, it is possible to effect change. Obviously, again, extreme poverty, food security, contaminated water, lack of access to services, as well as civil wars and other forms of conflict contribute to maternal, infant, and child mortality. Pre- and postnatal care are vital, but often unavailable. Child brides and rape victims who become pregnant require special care. The targets here are very ambitious, and countries will be heavily challenged in trying to meet them. For example, achieve universal health coverage, providing access to quality essential health services and safe, affordable vaccines and other medicines for all. This will mean reining in the giant pharmaceutical companies and obliging them to make medications available at reasonable prices. Another target is to increase recruitment, development, training, and retention rates of the health force in developing countries. This addresses the issue of brain drain, when rich countries lure professionals away from their own countries. It challenges governments of developing countries to provide resources that make it possible for health professionals to provide quality care and services at home instead of taking their training and skills elsewhere. Other targets are less challenging, but equally important. So in summary, let me say that for the achievement of these 3 goals, good governance is crucial in all countries, as is a sense of the common good. We heard the President of the General Assembly say in August, if all governments acted like global citizens, the world would be a better place for all.
Thank you very much.
The document Agenda 2030, Transforming the World, clearly says that developing countries must do their part. We IBVMs are there in the developing world. The document also states emphatically that developed countries must be generous in sharing financial and technical resources and do their part. We IBVMs are there in the developed world. As citizens, we need to hold our governments accountable, demanding that they report on progress towards achieving the goals they have promised to achieve by 2030. So as IBVMs, an NGO in consultative status with the United Nations, we have to watch and challenge our governments to do whatever they can to end poverty in all its forms everywhere by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. We'll move on now to goals 4, 5, and 6. Joyce?
My name is Mitzi, and I'm speaking for Joyce, who unfortunately is unable to be with us today. Joyce is from the United States. She is a longtime faith-based social justice advocate, founder of Women of Faith for Justice, a spouse, and a grandmother. She is speaking on education, empowerment of women and girls, and water and sanitation. Her words are, these goals are very close to my heart. Goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. All girls and boys require free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education that results in relevant and effective learning outcomes. Further, equitable access to affordable, quality, higher education, technical, vocational, or university is a must for women and men. In many countries, girls do not receive formal education. Some are restricted to working in dangerous or toxic environments, some to caring for children along with domestic responsibilities. Some are married themselves, not allowed to develop their talents that would provide them and their children with a higher quality of life and empower them to lead. The costs of schools are more than many families can afford. Governments must fund education of well-prepared teachers, school buildings, basic equipment, textbooks, and materials. Many non-governmental organizations are giving microloans to women in co-ops so that they can take vocational training and start businesses. Most are very successful. Mothers with such employment are better able to have all their children attend school. In 1996, I met indigenous women in Sucre, Bolivia, engaged in the first level of literacy education. The women did not give us eye contact or speak to us. In contrast, in Cochabamba, young Bolivian female nursing students gave presentations on native medicines and were very professional, confident, competent. Level of education made an obvious difference in student demeanor, behavior, and interaction with classmates and visitors. All children may have difficulty in attending schools in places of oppression and conflict. Travel to school is often dangerous. Injury, detention, or death can result, as in Palestine. Checkpoint security may deny passage at any time. Children struggle tremendously to learn in the presence of trauma, fear, violence, and homelessness. Education must have standards of quality and include not only children from diverse cultures living in the region, but also those with disabilities. Education must be inclusive. Goal 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Every March, the UN Conference on the Status of Women is held in New York City. A major focus is the life circumstances of girls and programs for them. Since Malala stood up for the education of girls in Pakistan, many others are coming together locally to strategize and advocate for gender equality and empowerment. They are making a difference in some places, but barely moving forward in others. Progress is often slow. For thousands, the situation needs immediate attention. The daily reality for many is horrific, demeaning, and intolerable. A young Moroccan woman shared how a baby girl is at risk going out the front door of her home, even with her father. Verbal and sometimes physical abuse of toddlers, girls, teens, young or old women is so constant they often decide not to leave their homes. In Bolivia, before 1990, there was no death penalty for a husband who killed his wife. Even now in many countries, the legal changes are often not enforced, especially for those with money. Discrimination against females continues, including human trafficking, sexual exploitation, female mutilation, and forced child marriage. Nevertheless, the number of girls and women standing up together is remarkable. They demonstrate phenomenal creativity and courage. When women find more leadership roles in politics, economics, and public life, and have the right to their own property, circumstances should improve. Goal 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. If any of you has experienced a water shortage or unsafe water, you realize how critical water and sanitation are. Water conservation and efficient use are of high priority. Water needs to be clean, free of pollutants, chemicals, hazardous waste, and properly treated. Protection and restoration of water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes, are critical. Many countries have natural resources. However, their governments do not always realize their value and allow outside business concerns to buy the rights to their water and take the profits. increased international cooperation and capacity building, and the support of developing countries in water and sanitation-related activities such as harvesting, desalination, efficient water usage, wastewater treatment, recycling, reuse, and their technology development also need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce, and thank you, Mitzi, for reading her text. We'll move on now to goals 7, 8, and 9.
Hi, I'm Zeta Smart from the United States, near Chicago. I'm a grandmother. I've been an elementary reading specialist and interventionist for 40 years and work in the schools with restorative justice, trying to get restorative justice principles in schools and communities. As an educator, I find building relationships, partnerships, and community with students, parents, staff, all the stakeholders was just the most effective way in meeting the needs of everyone, and especially the children. Likewise, all these goals that we're talking about, this is probably going to be a repeat because goals 7, 8, and 9, in order for them to be met, we need partnership and relationship building to address all of these goals and the creation of sustainable economic and ecological development. Things like affordable and clean energy, decent work, economic growth, inclusive industry that includes everybody, and innovative ideas, sustainable, resilient infrastructures. As everyone has said so far, these goals they're interconnected. So applying them, making them a reality, we need to work in partnership for this immense goal and hopeful goal to happen, or all these goals to happen. With enough political will of the people, by the people and for the people, goals 7, 8, and 9 seem very possible, and as well as we all know, very urgent. The employment of our young, very women empowerment, as everybody knows, improvement in energy efficiency, access to clean energy and technology, transforming our world and strengthening universal peace can only become a reality if we inclusively meet our greatest global challenge, like in the other goals of eradicating poverty and creating a world that's free of fear and violence. If we implement the goals by collaborative partnership, this can mobilize action over the next 15 years to overcome our world's immense challenges. However, our rising inequalities and enormous disparities can only be overcome if we work together to promote decent work for all, especially for the least developed countries and beyond, and the women everywhere in this agenda. I've heard how important gender equality, and it's so crucial to changing our world. Go girls. Anyway, creativity and innovation can improve sustainable consumption and production.
I'm afraid Sita must have got cut off there. So shall we move on to goals 10, 11, and 12?
Okay.
Hello. Yes.
Hello. I'm Maureen Edgar, and I'm a Loretto Associate from Toronto, Canada. I'm an educator, and I've worked in the areas of organization development and community development for many, many years. And I'm very committed to the issues that we're talking about today. I'm going to talk about development goals 10, 11, and 12. And you'll hear when I speak about them that there's a lot of repetition of some of the issues that other speakers have raised today. Goal 10 promises to reduce inequality within and among countries. It's sadly evident that poverty and income inequality continue to rise throughout the world. Today, the richest 10% of the world's population earn up to 40% of global income, while the poorest 10% earn only between 2 and 7%. Strategies for this goal promote social, economic, and political inclusion for everyone, regardless of sex, race, or ethnicity. Countries are committed to developing policies and laws to ensure equal opportunity in areas such as education and employment, which, if enacted, could be key to lifting people out of poverty. On a macro level, there are strategies to improve the regulation and monitoring of global financial institutions, certainly not an easy task, and to give developing countries a greater voice in the decision-making of these institutions. Underlying all the strategies is the principle that developing countries, like vulnerable individuals, need special and differential treatment to achieve greater equity. One of Goal 10's most challenging strategies is to facilitate the orderly and safe migration of people through well-planned and managed migration policies. As we've all seen in recent months, the huge difficulties in managing the current refugee crisis dramatically highlight the level of global commitment and coordination that we'll need to have to achieve this. Goal 10 also speaks to me on a personal level. Although I live in Canada, a country proud of its human rights legislation and its commitment to equity, many of our Indigenous people still live without adequate sanitation, housing, education, and safe drinking water. Goal 11 promises to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Today, more than half of the world's population lives in urban areas, and by 2050, that number will have risen to 2/3 of humanity. This goal is about building and managing our urban spaces in ways that promote and create sustainable development. Its strategies aim to ensure that by 2030, there will be access for everyone, particularly those most vulnerable, to adequate, safe, and affordable housing, to safe and inclusive public green spaces, and to safe, accessible, and affordable public transit. At national and regional levels, strategies encourage the adoption of integrated policies and plans for managing water, land, and other resources. Others focus on managing disasters and climate change in holistic ways, ways that build local capacity. For me, a key strategy is to support developing countries through financial and technical assistance in building sustainable and resilient buildings using local materials. Experience shows that using local and unprocessed materials minimizes transportation costs, energy usage, and environmental impact, and keeps more money in local communities. I know South Africa has done some very interesting work in terms of this. Goal 12, the final one I will speak to, promises to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. This goal urges us all to reduce our ecological footprint by changing how we produce and consume goods and resources. Today, one of the most critical global issues is our use of water, particularly in agriculture, which claims close to 70% of all fresh water appropriated for human use on the planet. Goal 12's other strategies target the disposal of toxic waste and pollutants and the recycling and reduction of waste at all levels, key to our health and survival. One strategy that really struck me was aimed at cutting in half per capita global food waste by 2030. In 2009, the UN estimates that 32% of all food produced in the world was lost or wasted. Given that a large part of the world's population doesn't consume enough food to meet even its most basic needs, this statistic is truly shocking. Meeting this ambitious target will not only boost food security, but will also improve people's livelihoods, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and save land and water. To me, it's evident that curbing food waste is both a goal in itself and a means of achieving other development goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. You can see we're getting a really global picture and how it how it relates to our own personal lives as we move on here. Now we'll move on to goals 13, 14, and 15.
Hi, my name is Mitzi Bino. I'm from the United States. I'm a retired physical chemist and social worker psychotherapist, currently advocating in the areas of social justice and group work, social work, group work, education. I'm a spouse and a mother. My input is on climate change readiness, and certainly Mexico is experiencing a challenge right today as we speak. Also on establishing sustainability in marine and terrestrial ecosystem development. We travel together on this blue planet in the vastness of space. Our continued physical existence depends on this view of our interdependence and how dedicated we are to meeting the following three goals. Goal 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. And shorten Goal 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. Two movies, one factual and one fictional, and one song come to mind. Apollo 13, which chronicled how the historical three astronauts survived an explosion in space through collaboration and creativity. And The Martian, about an astronaut presumed dead after a severe storm on Mars, who must now sustain himself there for years to come with only his resources and knowledge. And the song Ishe Oluwa, the translation of which is God's loving work is permanent and cannot be undone. Realizing the severity of Apollo 13, Jim Lovell had a pit-of-the-stomach feeling. Houston, we have a problem. That feeling and the image of the blue marble and those on it motivated him and now has to sustainably motivate us to global, collaborative, and creative efforts to use all physical and human resources wisely for our sustainable survival for eons to come. Apollo 13 tells us we've been here before and can survive. If we recognize the problem, accept it, react immediately to sustain life even while working on the future, take inventory, conserve, restore, recycle, manage and protect resources. Don't pollute beyond what we can clean up. Think outside the box. Use science. Listen to one another. Involve everyone. All of these urge us to look forward to the future with hope. Our planet and its biodiverse inhabitants will survive the storms using Goal 13 and solve the underlying problems sustainably using Goals 14 and 15. The song Ishe Oluwa was a global call to action in 2012 and 2013 by One Earth, One Voice. You can Google it. I invite you to sing it. Ishe Oluwa, Ole Bateo, Ishe Oluwa, Ole Bateo, Ole Bateo, Ole Bateo, Ishe Oluwa, Ole Bateo. For Goal 13, strengthened adaptive capacity to weather disasters, refine disaster plans, integrate the plans, educate using social media and global events, raise $100 billion annually over the next 5 years to address developing countries' needs. Include everyone. Increase ocean health. Reduce acidification, come to mind in Goal 14. Conserve 10% of the ecosystem. Restore, manage, and protect. Ensure abundant sea life. Increase contributions of biodiversity. Use science. Do research. Transfer technology using Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission guidance. Prevent and reduce pollution from land activity. Increase economic benefits to small islands with sustainable fisheries, aquaculture, and tourism. For Goal 15, fully address forests. Conserve, restore, and sustain, consistent with international agreements. Reforest and forests globally. Restore degraded land. Halt extinction of species and control invasive species. Fully address the mountain ecosystems and desertification. Fairly share access and benefits of genetic resources. Increase financial resources, incentives, and support for sustainable efforts and livelihood. Greatest challenge I see, those who continue to insist that climate change does not exist, who also control countries' purse strings. When the March of Dimes faced this type of dynamic, they approached the ordinary people to raise funds directly. Ishe Oluwa. Houston, we've lost contact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mitzi. We'll move to goals 16 and 17 now. And we're moving to Zambia. And I'm just hearing here that we're having a bit of difficulty with the line there. And just while we're waiting to see if we can get Ernest Bayemba back on the line, we'll just look at the two goals. One is about peace, justice, and strong institutions. And the other is about partnerships for the goals. And we have heard, and actually a number of you have spoken about these aspects already, but Ernest's task was to go into them in a bit more detail. So we'll just keep trying to call him and see if we can get him back, because it's a pity if we cannot get, the one person we have from Zambia, if we cannot get them on the line. But that is, I think, what happens at times with the technology. It just lets us down at times. So just while we're waiting a minute, I'd just like to go back to Sita, because if you're still there, Sita, because you got cut off at one point. Now, you were on goals 7, 8, and 9, and I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add to what you were saying when you got cut off. Are you there, Sita? No, I'm afraid she's not either. Okay, so then what we'll do, I think, is we'll move on now to the next goal, which or to goals for children. So, Phyllis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Phyllis is here. My name is Phyllis Parr. I live outside of Toronto in a small town just east of Toronto. I have been an IBVM associate since 1997. And as you can see, I am a grandmother. So that makes me a mother. And I am also a daughter and a wife. I work full-time outside of the home in a manufacturing company where I am an assistant office manager. So my task was to review the goals for children. And my resource was a link that we had to the child-friendly version of the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development. And from that link, I was able to print the booklet titled The World We Want. And it was produced by the Latin America and Caribbean Movement for Children. This booklet is a 30-page, colorful graphically designed learning tool aimed at children and young people. So my 10-year-old granddaughter Raquel and I sat at her kitchen table one Friday afternoon and read through the pages together. Some wording and terms were above my granddaughter's grade 5 level, but she did her best to understand the concepts that the 17 goals presented. Each goal has a question attached to it to stimulate the young person's creativity in reaching the goal or to find out why that goal is important. For example, goal number 3, good health, asks the question, what do children and young people need to stay healthy? At 10 years old, my granddaughter already knows enough to answer, a child needs enough food and water, they need to wash their hands and eat vitamins, and most importantly, she adds, a child needs to be taught how to be healthy by the people around them. So her answer leads into goal number 4, quality education, where my granddaughter states that to achieve this goal, every child needs the right supplies, educated teachers, and enough schools. Her choice for most important goal was goal number 5, gender equality. She answered the question, why is it important for boys and girls to be able to do the same things? And she answered this with compassion. So boys and girls won't be made fun of. Her answer implies that not only should girls be allowed to do boy things, but conversely, boys shouldn't be made fun of for doing girl things. Goal number 7 and onwards started to become too advanced for her comprehension. I tried to rephrase innovation and infrastructure, goal number 9, and responsible consumption, goal number 12, but I could see her eyes glaze over as I wasn't connecting with her grade 5 ability. I'm a bookkeeper by day, but I'm sure professional teachers would be able to help her grasp these ideas if they were given these booklets as part of school curriculums. And that is the point I would like to leave you with. The Latin America and Caribbean Movement for Children has done an excellent job of distilling the wordy and sometimes uninteresting language of the UN document, Transforming Our World. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And they developed it into a lively, geared for young and old alike, easy-to-understand resource. My wish would be to find this tool on all 193 UN member states' school syllabuses. If we start teaching these 17 goals to children and young people now, we will have future leaders and world citizens who will know and make these 17 goals a part of their lifestyle. Then we could confidently say, look out 2030, here we come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phyllis, for that. Now, we've gone through the declaration and the 17 goals, but not fully the 17 goals. And I'm sorry to say I haven't been able to get Ernest back online. That is just too bad. But we'll just have to continue now, and we'll move to, it's the, the part of the whole thing that needs to be addressed so that something actually happens, that things happen. And it's about the means of implementation and global partnerships and follow-up and review. So now over to you, Mary Rose.
Yes, it's Mary Rose O'Neill. I am from Toronto, Canada. I'm a mother and a grandmother, as well as a freelance editor and writer. And I noticed first in this section the combination of the two elements in its title. So we have both the means of implementation and the global partnership. The challenge for the United Nations, in light of the agenda's 17 goals and 169 targets, is going to be to establish and maintain that global partnership in order to implement, coordinate, and track all of these goals and targets. The agenda writers clearly recognize that challenge. Their partners are the 193 nations at very different levels of development and of capability, not only for implementing the agenda, but also for monitoring progress and for communicating their challenges and achievements. One thing I found rather curious in this section of the agenda is that the writers don't talk much about the fact that this global partnership includes the over 7 billion people of this world. It's not just national governments and national and international organizations that need to be part of the implementation and the tracking. To quote the opening words of the UN Charter, we, the peoples of the United Nations, all of us ordinary people, are going to need to be partners too. Excuse me. Of course, I realize that the UN works with governments and organizations, and that the global partnership starts with those larger entities. With so many agencies, UN divisions, governmental and other organizations involved, the balancing act, national and international, is going to be very challenging. The writers also focus on the interconnection among all the elements of their agenda. That very interconnectedness is going to make both implementing and monitoring progress formidable. On the one hand, the fact that 193 countries are involved demonstrates the need for a partnership and for commitment to that partnership. On the other hand, each of those nations has its own actual circumstances and priorities, governments, and infrastructures. The agenda writers go into considerable detail about the various parties that must be involved in this partnership if it is to succeed, linking those parties to the ideas of both implementation and the need for a global partnership. For example, the business sectors, the international trade sectors, debt sustainability, especially for developing nations, and science and technology. In the final section of the agenda, the writers detail what they call the robust, voluntary, effective, participatory, transparent, and integrated follow-up and review processes and the principles on which those processes are based. All well and good, but I wonder how the results of their monitoring will be communicated to the public. I'm thinking here especially of the young, and Phyllis just spoke to us about one aspect of this. So especially of the young, grade school, high school.
You want me to sit on the table?
And I'm sorry? I'll continue. I'm thinking here especially of the young, grade school, high school, and university students around the world. Communicating with this audience will have to be very carefully prepared with full appreciation of the purpose the communication is to serve and the audience it is intended for. Engaging young people will be necessary, but also very challenging, especially with the complexity of this agenda, its goals and its targets, the various forums and departments that are involved, and of course, the 193 member countries and the 7 billion people in those countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Rose. Now, we've had an amazing overlook at the whole 2030 development agenda, and I hope it has been helpful for all of you listening. So we'll just now, if you have any comments that you would like to make, would you just write them in now? I just see there's something here I want to ask our speakers, and this is more going on to the personal part of it, because as I told you at the beginning, we've all just studied up the documents, the background and all of that, put a lot of work into it to make it possible and to make this absolutely excellent sharing possible. So, but I just want to ask you, what that experience was like for you. Maybe some of you there would like just to pipe up and tell us, from your perspective, the preparing all of this, what was the experience like? And maybe you can tell us some of your surprises or discoveries in the endeavor. So anyone just begin there. I'm not going to go down the line, shall we say. Okay? Who'd like to pipe up first?
This is Missy. I found that 5 minutes is a very short time to speak on three such serious topics. It required knowledge and creativity and a sense of limited time to make it all work. It required communications across cultures, listening, and multiple clarifications without judgment. It required determination at using new technology with the help of experts to facilitate connection. It required flexibility, input, feedback, and evaluation from others. It was an experiential learning, and it will continue to reveal its lessons over time. But I see it as a microcosm of the tasks ahead in achieving the goals themselves. And so I'm going to continue to look at the interactions and how we dealt with the limited resource of time and navigated the differences involved.
Thank you. Anybody else?
This is Maureen speaking. I found it was very difficult at first to just plow through the material in the goals and strategies. And so I'm sure for our audience it must be equally challenging because maybe you're hearing some of it for the first time. And I thought that going on the Internet and looking at other documents and seeing what other countries are doing in different areas, for me was very, very helpful. And I think, as has been said, it was challenging to try to condense three goals and a lot of strategies into just a few minutes. And so I felt myself it was hard to do justice to the enormity of the goals, particularly if I took the refugee crisis. I just didn't even know how to begin to speak to the complexity of the issues that we're facing. So I guess for me it was really an eye-opener in terms of the kind of communication that we need to do at all levels. And I think Phyllis and Mary Rose certainly spoke about it in ways that touched me. And I think in terms of our Loretto involvement, if there was a way that we could continue this communication and education of ourselves and the people in our worlds, I think that would be really, really helpful and important.
I agree. This is Mary Rose. I agree absolutely.
This is Phyllis here. I am very glad that I picked the child's version of the Sustainable Development Goals, because when I did first print off the reading of the 30 double-sided pages of the 17 goals and the targets and how to achieve them, it seemed very overwhelming for me. I don't have like a university education, so it was a lot to take in. So when I was connected with this child's version, it brought it all down to something I could understand, and it was, yes, they still had the 17 goals, but they had them in an elementary, very basic form. So I could learn, first of all, about what they were and see very simply how they were, and then from there, as someone who would be more educated, I could, investigate even further. But for anybody who's just wanting to get a taste of it, and it was too much reading or too difficult to understand or overwhelming, I would really suggest going to the child-friendly version that is done by the Latin American Caribbean Movement for Children. It is excellent resource, and it really, for children and adults who are having a hard time understanding it, it was an excellent tool. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Thank you.
Thank you. That's where I began myself.
Judy?
Well. Judy, come on.
Yeah. Okay. I found the document challenging, and time-wise, it was short, but generally it was an exciting and wonderful experience. And listening to each one has given me new insights and wider perspective, putting in mind that we as an institute, it has linked in very, very well with our IBVM GC 2014 calls, whereby I've been able to link very well our calls talking about we challenged ourselves to create the oneness that moves us across the boundaries, to bring those forced to live in poverty to the center of our life and ministry as an institute, to live sustainably, defining what is enough. And I found the document very helpful because it's sort of talking the same language. And if I talked on behalf of other religions, all our currencies actually are already or trying to live the same sustainable goals. So when we are all in it, and if we all sang the same tune, change is possible. I am hopeful.
Thank you.
This is Yvonne. I had some experience with, educating people about the Millennium Development Goals, which was a much easier task because there were 8 goals and a few targets under each goal. But having 17 goals and 100 and some targets is a much more challenging thing. The other thing I'd like to say is that, I think the Education for Sustainable Development was a document that came from the UN a number of years ago. And we as an institute, with all of the schools that we have, I think we could play a significant role in promulgating and educating people about and increasing awareness about and raising action on these goals if we would take that kind of education to heart.
Right on. Anybody else have any other people like to say a few words about your experience? Yeah, I was just thinking myself, as I hear you talk as well. I mean, it's amazing. It's huge. The whole agenda is huge, and that is one of the conversations that is going on here at the United Nations. People were saying, the MDGs were much easier, because there were only 7. But then they decided that they needed these 17, and they needed the huge agenda we have because, our world and our human family has become huge and increasingly more complex. So there is all of that, and I think one of the drawbacks maybe of the MDGs was it was a kind of reductionist. And a whole lot of new elements have come into place and other elements that were left out, as well as what was not finished. All of that needed to be looked at. So that is why we have what we have. And it is a challenge for us all, and it will be a huge challenge to communicate it. But I think even what we've done here today is a very good kind of first attempt at it, because your explanations and your presentations, I find they have been really helpful, and they've been helpful for me. And one of the things I'm aware of as well, that from the point of view of ourselves as institute, like our calls from what we call our calls from our last general congregation, they link in totally with this agenda, and then we can also link that with what the present Pope is saying, and what he's been saying recently in the encyclical, and even what is said at the United Nations. So somehow or other, all of it is interconnected, So I think that for us could be a really good impetus, because it's not that we're going on parallel lines, but all of it is a way of living out our life, So I think that is a kind of a support, a help for us as we move forward, right? And now, just we're coming up towards the end, but before we finish, I'd just like you, all your speakers, just to kind of give, should we call it a final word of advice? What advice now would you give as we're moving forward? What kind of advice would you give to those who are listening to us, those who are listening in today? What would you have to say to them? So we'll just give a rundown through the order that we've been in, and see what you have to encourage us, shall we say, right? So would you begin, Judith?
Phyllis, you said?
Yes, could you give us, what advice would you give to those who are listening, as we move forward, as we try to take on this sustainable development agenda?
Well, I've mentioned it before. I will sort of put a plug in for it again. This the child-friendly version of the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development is a lot easier it was for me to understand, and to feel that it was more hopeful. I guess I thought when I read the adult version, it was very daunting. I somehow couldn't, I just felt overwhelmed. And when I read the child's version, it seemed more possible. And also when I connected with my granddaughter and saw how she responded to these goals already, like some of them she already has, she knows them. Other children in other countries would probably know different goals than her. But to do the 17 goals as a package, I think is an excellent goals to work towards. And I really congratulate the Latin America and Caribbean movement for children, because they have advanced and done so much good work to present these goals in a way that will help the young people take these goals on themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith, would you like to give some words of encouragement or advice?
Yeah, mine, I would just like to go back again to what I said earlier on, that, we are living in a very challenging world with so many overwhelming issues, but I would just like to say that not all is lost. Let us face the reality and keep at it.
Thank you. Yvonne?
I've been quite disappointed in looking at the press and the media, because there's been very little attention paid to this Agenda 2030. So, and there has been a lot of attention paid to the encyclical. So I would just encourage us when we're talking about the encyclical and when we're at presentations on the encyclical and so on, to try to make those connections with Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, because the synchronicity is astounding, and it would be a way to bring them to people's attention. And the same for us as IBVM when we're looking at our own calls from GC14, to make that connection with the Sustainable Development Goals as we go along, and to initiate conversations about it wherever we are.
Thank you. Sita, are you there? No, I think she must be online. So, Maureen, would you like to come on?
Yes, thank you. I would certainly echo what Yvonne just said. When I was thinking, what would I want to say to people, which is what I'm saying to myself, and that is to really pay more attention, to really educate yourself, to find a way that you can make these goals real for yourself. And working on this presentation has certainly made me think about even looking at how I use food and how I use other resources every day. And I'm aware that I've heard very little about the goals from the media, from the government, in my city, in my province, in my country. And I'm trying to think about ways, now that we have a new government, that I think in Canada will be more receptive to the spirit of the goals. I'm going to try to find a way to make my own voice heard by contacting my MP just as a first step. So I guess I would encourage other people to look at your own sphere and see how you can, educate yourself and others about the goals and the strategies by reading and learning about them, first of all, and also talking to other people, because I found my friends didn't know about them either. And also to see if there's a way on a larger level in whatever work or capacity you find yourself to bring these issues forward. Thank you.
Mitzi?
I would say that the thing that has struck me is we are not alone. We have each other. If we can learn to collaborate and can bring forth our creativity, bring forth our individual talents, and let our voices be heard, we have a chance to achieve these goals.
Thank you. Mary Rose?
Yes, I was delighted to hear people refer to Pope Francis's encyclical, and to Yvonne speak to it just a few moments ago. I would love to see a webinar that would look at the UN document and the encyclical as a pair, and I think that would be marvelous, because one of the reasons I say that is that the encyclical is extremely understandable. The folks who put that together knew who their audience was, and so it might be, as I say, very helpful to put that alongside these goals and study the two of them together. Thank you, and thank you for today. That was wonderful.
Thank you very much. So now, before we come to the end, just to say, well, we have 50 years ahead of us, to make this new Sustainable Development Agenda a transformative force for our world, our people, and our planet. So with that, I just want to thank you. First of all, thanks to the speakers, to Judy, Yvonne, Joy, Sita, Maureen, Mitzi, Ernest, who couldn't connect, and Phyllis and Mary Rose. And there are a whole lot of people who are behind this, and I'd like to thank them. So thanks to our UN province representatives, Mary Malani from Canada, Francis McCarran from the United States, Elizabeth Donnan and Pat Handley from Zambia and South Africa. And South Africa will actually have people speaking on another webinar, right? Thanks to the general leadership, and thanks to Infinity for your support as well.
And there's another group of people that's around there, and it's all the friends of Facebook and Twitter, you know, and you people who share the information that's sent out from the NGO office, you share it with your networks, you know, and that is helping to create a whole new network for us. So I'm really thankful to you, and I know that a number of you have actually shared information about this webinar in your own, with your own personal network. So, and with that, finally, a big, big thank you to all who are listening in. Thank you so much. I know you're here from a number of different countries, and that there are a lot of you, and a lot of you are sitting down together at the same computer. And thanks to those of you who have actually organized groups, because I know some of you have been doing this. You've been organizing groups, maybe evangelist sisters, or groups of your communities, or groups of friends, to come together, to sit around the computer and to listen to this. So thanks to all of you. And now, just before we finish off, I just want to say to the speakers that when the transmission ends, would you just stay online on your phones, please, so that we can just chat for a few minutes. So with that, I'll say thank you, and until we meet again, right? Bye.